welcome to Watches Tonight. It's a big episode. We only get to do this one once, and it will only ever be a one-time gig. So tonight, I finally own my GRAIL watch. We're going to talk all about that, chat live, and I'm going to share some of your GRAILs during viewer wrist shots. We got Sid on the switcher tonight, and we've got our many friends from around the world in the box. I want to watch Enrique Cassiano, Miroslav from Europe, Jim from the UK, Rich Mitch, Cull Obsidian, 911 Euro from Winter Park, Florida, Sean Hansen's in the box, along with Richard Warren, Herb. We got Randy S, Aristocratic, Edward Ledden of Sweden, Junior Johnson, Abdul from Germany, Stephen from Liverpool. Welcome to one and all. Perry P, good to see you, my man. All right, so this evening there is a lot to discuss, but before we do any of that, keep in mind that the official after party to Watches Tonight, where the party never really stops, is my Instagram, Tim_Mosso. You can see a little bit of the life of Tim Mosso and many, many, many one-minute reviews, the coolest watches we've got, including a lot of things that aren't actually on our website. So check out Tim_Mosso on Instagram. I don't know if we have the Instagram image, but there it is. Very cool. By the way, you can see a little window into the world of Tim Mosso. I often post pugs and cars when I'm not posting watches. Viewer wrist shots number one, Jeff S., a man who only owns GRAIL watches. He's leading off with his Armstrong 1 week skeleton variant. Wasim R. takes Timex Snoopy to watch his McLaren Special Operations upgrade and modernization of his Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren, possibly the most underrated of the supercar trio of the Enzo, the Carrera GT, and the SLR from the early 2000s. I would love to see the finished product once they're done with your SLR, my man. Daniel K. is at Lake Lucerne with his Rolex Submariner LV. That's the Starbucks, I suppose we could call it these days. I have to say, that seems a lot more tropical than Switzerland, but apparently Lake Lucerne. We have Sachin, who stuns with his 1916 sourced Patek Philippe 5134R travel time alongside the E. Howard constructed chronometer. Thank you for trusting our company. I appreciate that. We have Giannis M. next. Impresses with his rare and exotic Crador 9661 quartz, which looks incredibly like the Patek Philippe 3770. We have Tak, who forwards a site that melts my heart. This is the get-together by the UK branch of the Talking Time with Tim Mosso Facebook group. They actually got together in the real world in Leeds, and this was their meetup in the real world based on a Facebook group that exists in cyberspace. Thanks to Jim and everyone from our UK crew who helped to organize this. We have Josh P. and a familiar face who represent the Bethune Circle of Owners with the DBS off to the left with dark dial and the DBD off to the right with the anthracite dial. Send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at the1916company.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Let's see who's in the box. We have Unpaved. Congrats, Tim. Been seeing that Bethune on the wrist and wondering if your dreams came true. Maybe. We have Cameron T joining in, making a live show, and I appreciate it. We got Ron H. Congrats, Tim. GRAIL achieved. And we've got Kaloy saying hello, Tim, along with B&S, Kevin Bennett. Fantastic news on your purchase, Tim. And we got Renside from Richmond, Virginia. We got Joshua M. Good day from Auckland, New Zealand, getting up early with us. I appreciate that. All right, so my GRAIL watch is real here and now. I wore it to sort of soft launch it last time I was on, and I wondered some of you would pick it up, and actually quite a few of you did. And there was some chat around the internet and on some of my many media. So I want to fully explain this process, including my thought process and how it all came together. But I think that we should discuss what a GRAIL watch is first. So I have known the term GRAIL watch, since I've been a watch enthusiast, which is probably going on 25 years from my first tentative steps into the wristwatch internet of the late 1990s, early 2000s. As a collector in earnest, I have refined my understanding of what the term means, and I've cycled through a number of watches that I considered GRAILs at the time, while honing my view of which one specifically was the real endgame GRAIL. So what is a GRAIL watch? Everyone has a definition. I want to see yours in the chat box, so just let me know, what do you think a GRAIL is? And I'll read your reactions as I pontificate on this topic. So everyone has a different definition. Some would say it's a serious but attainable goal that can be achieved with careful planning. So something like that would be my old, well, let's just go with something that I've considered the Cadillac of dive watches since my very first Watch You On video, which was the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. This is a lot of money, but you can still get this on a strap new for under 20 grand, and probably about half that if you want to get one pre-owned. But the 5015 for me, 5-day power reserve, beautiful movement, highly durable, very accurate, sapphire capped bezel, tons of lume, and a fantastic sailcloth strap. This is something that is difficult to attain, but with a little bit of planning, prioritizing, yeah, this is something you can make happen and something I could make happen. So that's a serious goal that can be achieved with careful planning and a little bit of patience. Or some people might say that a GRAIL watch is an outrageous ambition that cannot be reasonably attained. A watch that requires a major miracle. So this is something more like a true conception of the Holy Grail, like the mythical Holy Grail. Something that is more of a search for yourself. And you can never truly find the Grail because it's a metaphor for some or other kind of searching. But it is something beyond the scope of reason, imagination, or reality. And for some, that's what a GRAIL watch is. It would be a Patek Philippe Caliber 89. It would be something like the Harrison H4, the Marie Antoinette by Breguet. Not something that you can ever truly own. Or a watch that's just so darn expensive it would never be realistic, like a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, or something like a Patek Philippe 5016. That's a great example for me of something I will never be able to own, but which I consider to be the absolute apex of watchmaking. Or perhaps the Bethune DB29, a watch that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and is only available as a custom order. So that is a watch that requires a major miracle, like a lottery win. Or something that's between these two, a real stretch if everything in your life lines up perfectly. And that is what I'm wearing today. My DB, and we have Cull Obsidian saying, and now we understand why Tim wasn't buying any new watches. That's true. That's true, because with something like this, you do have to sort of prioritize. And then we also have Mark A saying nice work, which I appreciate. We got Nelson Stack, and we got Jim Millett saying hi Neil, evening Abdul, we're all friends here, I love that. Moto Gunner in the box from Athens, Georgia. And now let's talk about what a GRAIL is. Jim saying the Leeds meetup was fantastic. Damon S saying, every time I see you on a chat, Horology Brandon, I pop over to your site to see what is new and interesting. Seeing you here reminds me to keep up with what's going on in your world too. That's true, because this is a nexus for community. We got OT staying up late in Italy. Mark A saying a GRAIL is the next stretch, but not the last. Interesting. We have Soma R saying GRAILs don't exist. There is always a next one. Abdul saying, GRAIL watch is a moving target in most cases. I consider a GRAIL watch an almost unattainable watch that would satisfy every sense for the collector. And Jonathan R. finally made it live, just bought the 50 Fathoms 5010 in steel. So you got the anniversary one, right? Unless I'm mistaken, the standard 5010 that's still just rose gold and titanium. And then we have Cull Obsidian. Is a 4-digit Daytona a GRAIL? No. Is Paul Newman a GRAIL? Absolutely. I like that. We got CK joining in. Evening, gents. Robert Taylor. Platinum Majoran Monopoussoir would be his GRAIL. For Miroslav, my GRAIL is an Anderson Genève Orbita Lune hors série. That is a great choice. And Edward saying the GRAIL for me is the JLC Amvox 3 Tourbillon GMT. We got Dr. Kevin Moore in the box. Congratulations, Tim. I don't think a GRAIL is obtainable, honestly. It's the strongest object of obtainable desire. I have about 5 of them. And then we've got Abdul saying the search for the GRAIL is the watch collecting journey itself. The end means the start of a new level or chapter. And Jonathan T saying GRAIL is the greatest ever, like LeBron James chasing the greatest ever ghost. Very, very cool. All right, so here's where my GRAIL journey started. Omega Central Tourbillon. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was an Omega man. My grandpa had an Omega. My graduation watch, his Omega was a retirement watch. My graduation watch was an Omega. And in the world of Omega, aside from hardcore vintage, this is pretty much the summit of Olympics. So the summit of Olympus is either gods or a godlike watch, and at least in an Omega sense, this is what Zeus would wear. This is the central tourbillon created by Maurice Grimm to mark the 100th anniversary of the formal establishment of the Omega brand. It came out in 1994 and it was unusual on a lot of levels. Flying tourbillon, central tourbillon, magic discs indicating the hour and minute, and surprisingly automatic winding. So that for me was the original Grail. To a person who idolized the Pierce Brosnan era Bond Seamaster, this was the first Grail. And I still regard it highly today as it represents something that is the best of Omega encapsulated, a true commitment to history, horology, and within the tourbillon workshop, hand craftsmanship, which is not something you get on a mainstream Speedmaster, DeVille, or Seamaster. I've never owned it, but I may someday. The JLC Duomet chronograph in white gold. Now here's one I did own. I loved the original 2007 Duomet, but exclusively in gold or platinum. As something I didn't like the platinum's gray or white dial. I didn't like the gold cases. Intellectually I loved it, but I was not in love with the look of it until this came out in 2000. I believe this was 2010. So white gold, black dial, 2 drivetrains in one watch, and yes, a 200-piece limited edition, 1/2 the dial for the chronograph, 1/2 the dial for the time. That's why it has 2 power reserve indicators. I remember when I opened the box for this, after 4 years of savings, I got chills a little bit. And it's a feeling I had again very recently. But this was a watch, it was my Grail for 4 years. I owned it for 4 years, the most accurate mechanical watch I've ever owned. I did sell it because I thought there was a time I was getting out of the watch industry and moving on to my next chapter. I thought the money was going to be important. I do miss it, and I do regret that sale. And it's one of the only watches I ever bought new from a dealer. JLC Reverso Platinum No. 2. Now this is one that I bought back in 2016. And to me, this became the embodiment of everything that was great about JLC. Respect for history, extraordinary boundary pushing, micro-mechanical art, and the fact that it was a watch with a caseback tourbillon that you could disappear when you wanted to, and that's how I prefer my tourbillon. It was rare. Supposedly they planned 500, but there's no way they made 500. I've never seen a serial number anywhere near that high. Solid white gold dial, solid white gold tourbillon movement, and the movement used the architecture of the caliber 170 chronometry trials tourbillon from the 40s and 50s, which again I love. So this was the epitome of JLC, and to me it still represents the best of La Grande Maison. And it's the only watch I ever bought and sold for the same amount of money. I did not lose 1 cent on that Grail. I've cycled between Grails since departing my JLC mono brand collection theme. All of these watches are still on my wish list. That is, I haven't given up the idea that I might someday own them. IWC Grand Complication, the 3770, 42 millimeters in platinum with a white sort of metal black dial aesthetic that makes it a little bit sportier and more viable than colored gold or a white dial. The black dial with the platinum case, oh my gosh. And in 42 millimeters, a wearable Grand Complication, a Venturine moonphase disc, Kurt Klaus perpetual calendar, a Renault Papy designed minute repeater, and yes, a chronograph on top of all of that. It's a 75 jewel modification of a Valjoux 7750. I will own one of these someday, but it was not my ultimate Grail, not in the end. Zenith Academy Georges Favre-Jacot, the anniversary watch with fusee and chain and El Primero escapement from the 2015 anniversary year. And this is one of the most beautiful watches I've ever encountered, and it really does remind me that Zenith is so much more than chronographs, and most of their history amounts to excellence outside the realm of chronographs. I can't think of any watch that better embodies all of the crafts that Zenith specializes and masters under one roof. So for me, that's a Grail, but in colored gold and 45 millimeters, probably not something I could wear in the end. I don't think I'll ever own it. The Zenith Chronomaster Perpetual Calendar, on the other hand, reminds me of the kind of Zenith Chronomasters from the early Nataf era that got me into watch collecting and the Zenith brand specifically, back when they were hard to find in the United States. And even though it's a 45, I know it can just fit on my wrist, so it remains on my list. White gold, COSC chronometer, El Primero chronograph, and a perpetual calendar. It is all of those things. I will own this watch someday, but it was not my endgame grail. Patek Philippe 5236P. Get it with the blue dial, get it with the salmon dial, or as they call it, rose gilt opaline. I don't care, but this thing for me is pretty much the ultimate Patek Philippe. Even with a limitless budget, I might still find myself picking this up at the dealer. And it's a watch that represents a lovely thread of their history with a calendar system hitherto only seen on their pocket watches, but brought over for the first time for use on a wristwatch. Micro rotor movement, a case that was inspired by the historic 3448 and 3450 perpetual calendars, especially with the white gold hand and indices setup of this 2024 variant, firing on all cylinders. And I may still own it, but it's too accessible and common to be my grail. And then Ferdinand Berthoud, FB1R6, carburized steel case like Zintegament. You can't scrape it with a razor blade. And the most beautiful fusee and chain tourbillon movement you've ever seen in your life in a lugless case that wears tiny. The only thing I don't love here is the real estate-like price of, I think at the time, $250,000, and the fact that it is rather difficult to read, if we're being totally honest. But what a watch. But I've only encountered one instance, even among all of these grails and prospective grails, where I considered both the brand and the watch to be grails. A grail watch from a grail brand, as it were. Let's see what you guys are saying in the box. Soma R, is finally getting your grail proof that it wasn't the true grail? No, because it took a couple of consecutive miracles to make this happen, and I think by nature, attaining the grail is a miraculous occurrence. It doesn't happen for everyone. We have Jim Millett saying that DB looks amazing on you, Tim. Thank you very much. That's one of the reasons why it became my ultimate Bethune grail. Others I admired but couldn't wear. This fits beautifully. What else is going on in the box? Mirrored on Glage. Congrats to Tim for finally getting a top-tier watch in Bethune and the specific one he wanted after many years of watching and wondering if it would happen. And then we've got Soma R saying maybe grail could be defined as a long-term goal you have to work a lot for, or it has to have the mystery factor of just being beyond reach, not being able to get it. And then we got Tack joining in. He's the mastermind of our UK get-together. A grail is never achievable. When you get there, you realize it's a false dawn and you chase again, like chasing the end of the rainbow. Ah, yes, the receding horizon theory. That's a good one and definitely a valid one. For a lot of folks, that is what a grail is. And for Michael J. Wolf, that grail would be a Patek Philippe 5013. Boom. That's a bomber grail. Perry P. Think Tim is like 25 years away from liking gold watches. Well, I like white gold right now. I'm wearing one. It's the yellow gold and the rose gold that I can't get along with. And then we have Carrie B saying Zenith Georges Favre Jacot is beautiful, and I got to agree with that. We got Daddy Dun Dun saying congrats, let's hope the honeymoon lasts forever, like the Sandlot, forever. And then let's talk about viewer wrist chat. Some of you are on mine. Okay, viewer wrist chat starting with Luis R and his Nomos Campus Club Orange overlooking the Elbe with some wine. Very nice, well set up. We have Tony C, who enjoys Japanese Soku with his Grand Seiko 20th Anniversary Spring Drive, looking good. We got Gareth, who thinks differently on the beach with his Ulysse Nardin Diver at dawn. We got Ryan W, combining Longines, mountain bike, and Rocky the Kali. I like the foreground, middle ground, and background. Excellent depth of field. Well done, Ryan. We got Ruben S. enjoys Labor Day weekend from behind the wheel of his Lexus, I believe, with a custom cuff and his Rolex Datejust Wimbledon. Guys, send your wrist shouts to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your wrist on my list. Randy S., the sacrifice to obtain the grail has to be felt and equal to the achievement. And then we've got Thomas Oliver Price saying his grail would be the Zenith Pilot Double-Matic, that is a great grail. And then Jake H., what dress alarm watches are there apart from the Senator Diary? Oh my gosh, a million. From Harry Winston, from Gerard Perregaux, from JLC, from Vulcain, from Patek Philippe with the 5520. That's a very expensive one, but it's the minute repeater of alarm watches. Ulysse Nardin has had a few. I would say that Ulysse Nardin's Sonata is an incredible dress alarm watch. If you want to go down that route, you will not be disappointed. And we could go on and on and on. There are Seikos, there are Omegas, there are vintage Tudor advisors, but you will not run out of options. What else is going on? Abdul, should there be other terminology for watches that are expensive but still somehow attainable if everything works out? Semi-grail. I think that's how a lot of people define grail. The easy rail, my grail is to steal a Patek 1527 from the museum. Well, that would be the place to find one. What, were there only 2 of them, I want to say? What else going on here? So my Grail watch is real here and now. Let's evolve this thought. I found the most intense Grail watch experiences generally involve a brand that is already a personal favorite of yours and mine. So while not mandatory, I'd say that you're more likely to connect deeply with a watch if you already share that brand's values. In 2016, I met my Grail brand, de Bethune. I'd seen them here and there, photographs of things unbelievable, a moment's glance at a watch on a wrist at an event. But being South Florida strip mall used watch vendors as we were, we didn't have a whole lot of experience with stuff like that. That's the elite of elite. We weren't in that league. We didn't play in that echelon. And in 2017, you can see I've been a fan since back in the day. That is the Watch You Want set. That is version 1 of this. But that was my first encounter with I was already in the tank for them, by the way, but that was my first encounter with the Bethune DB28 Kind of Blue Meteorite Tourbillon. And I had this epiphany. It left me with no doubt that de Bethune was in fact my ultimate brand. Top to bottom, there was nothing that wasn't astonishing, and their flagship watches were on a level that would impress, frankly, the smartest programmer at Apple and the most brilliant engineer at NASA. This is brilliance that impresses brilliance. And I dubbed de Bethune the company that only makes Grail watches. There is no filler. Even the most accessible watch is not a cheap de Bethune and is packed with patented elements and an out-of-this-world aesthetic. So the decision was made on that front. I was convinced. But I wasn't quite sure which de Bethune Grail would become my ultimate ambition and my personal vision of what the ultimate watch experience could be. At first, I thought it would be the DB28 Digitale. Back when Federico was with us, Federico was a fun guy. I liked going watch shopping with him. We'd go out, we'd look at watches, and we went to Boca Raton, and I saw a DB28 Digitale in a group of watches we were being offered for Watch You Want, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I have to have this. But we didn't settle on a price for the package of the watches, and I never got to wear it. But for years after that, it was just on the mind, in the brain, something that was inextricable. I thought about it every day. But here's the problem right here. Jump hour, spherical moon, everyday friendly titanium case, but it was too big at 45 millimeters. And once I got to the point where I was handling watches like this on a regular basis, I had to admit that no matter the lug size, and they do have a few different ones, this was never going to fit and look proportional, and it broke my heart. I had to acknowledge reality and give up on that dream, while still admiring the watch, by the way. I also loved the DB27 Polo, which at 43 millimeters with shorter lugs was a much more wearable watch. It also had a jump hour, which I love. It had recessed displays that were lower than the plane of the case, so they couldn't be smashed during use in a polo tournament. And this watch was released as part of a sponsorship of a, I believe, Belgian polo tournament. It also featured a hard metal case covered with DLC, approaching 5,000 Vickers, indelible, indestructible, shock-resistant, and wearable, jump hour, automatic winding, 5-day power reserve. What's not to love? This thing is as murdered as a Rolls-Royce Cullinan black badge. It looks absolutely savage. It's everything I loved about the Digitale and more, plus I could wear it. But of the 10 pieces planned, my understanding is that only 1 to 3 actually exist. I've never seen one in person, and I can't pin my dreams on something that might not be available, regardless of my savings discipline or my willingness to spend. Like some types of vintage watch in certain conditions, you sometimes just can't find one even if you're budgeted for it. And so this, regrettably, fell off the radar of my GRAIL search. And then, in a totally random Google image search for something completely different from de Bethune, I found an image of a watch too good to be true. Easy to wear, inline full calendar, and I love jumping indicators and I love calendars. All the de Bethune patented gadgets, a jump hour display, a spherical moon phase, and so much more, but the DBD. That DBD. Shooting my first video with a DBD in 2021 was a ecstatic, euphoric experience, almost religious. And I don't get too emotional about inventory watches at work out of a need for self-financial preservation. I was truly in awe of this thing, and I couldn't believe I had the chance just to hold it. And this is a guy who has held thousands of watches. By the time I experienced this firsthand, I had worn Journe's Grande Sonnerie. I had worn the Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime, $1 million vintage pieces. This still took the cake. And this was the rose gold version. So I became aware of how rare the DBD was. 39 pieces made since 2006 in precious metal. I mentioned in that video if that had been the white metal version, it might be mine already because I don't wear colored gold and I wasn't quite budgeted for it, but for white metal, I might have gone all out. And with only 17 made in white gold and only 9 made with the anthracite dial, it wasn't an opportunity I ever expected to have. Until today. That is the watch on my wrist shortly after it arrived, complete with a handwritten note from Denis Flageolet of de Bethune. Every single person there is like family to me, and it's a feeling I can't relate to anything else I've done in the business. Diane James, Aldous Nadiri, Jorg Heisig Jr., Pierre Jacques, Justin Rees, and of course, Denis Flageolet. All of these people are friends. I've been around the world with them. I've been to their factory. We've been brothers in arms, and I'll never forget that. But this is like the tie that binds in the way nothing else can. They paid so much attention to my videos that when they started looking out for the watch to help me connect with it, they knew exactly what model, what generation of it, what case metal, and what dial variant. This is not something that happens with Omega, with Rolex, with Patek Philippe, even with FP Journe. So what an experience, living up to your wildest dream, my wildest dream, of what an independent brand watch experience could be. So let's take a look at this watch. The inline calendar is actually a tribute to pocket and wrist watches made in the 20s and 30s by Audemars Piguet, Breguet, and Cartier, and the jump hour display going further back with the scrolling minutes in the jump hour to the Joseph Paul Weber pocket watches made by IWC in the late 19th century. So historically rooted, but still very cool and very modern. The case comes from, or the case shape with the hinge lug and the bullhead winder, almost like a pendant watch or a pocket watch. It comes from 2005's DBS, but the DBD and the DBS share the same inspiration, pocket and pendant watches for both DBS and DBD. On the reverse, there is a fired blue titanium plate that's fired blue titanium inlaid with little pieces of gold to create the constellations, and then a spherical moon phase, which you can see is three-dimensional. 1/2 fire-blued steel, 1/2 white palladium. It is correct for 122 years between adjustments, and yes, it's patented. 2023? Well, in 2023, they decided to reissue the watch. They were stingy with the pieces. It looks, if you want to see the movement inside my watch, because it's got the caseback moon phase, but it looks like this. Because in 2023, they made 13 pieces with burgundy dial, and 20 pieces with that green dial in titanium, the Evergreen. The Evergreen and the Season 2 both have that display caseback. So if we could go back to that display caseback, that is on the latest version of the DBD, of which only, well, the 13 plus 20 pieces were made. So if you want to know what's inside my watch, how it's decorated, and what it looks like that. All DBDs from 2006 to the present number 72 watches, and that is part of the madness of Bethune. They always think about what's cool first. Numbers and finances be damned, because they created tooling to make 72 cases over almost 2 decades. So how do I feel now that I have my DBD? Well, awestruck. I still can't believe this has happened. I have felt maybe 2 or 3 times in my life as a watch collector chills and goosebumps as I handle a watch for the first time and open the box. And I felt that this time, but to a degree that even that 1 or 2 prior experiences cannot match. It was a completely unique feeling of being in awe and shocked and amazed and elated all at the same time. And I felt at the time grateful. Generally, that life has turned out so well, and to all the people on my team who have made that life possible, including my production crew, the executives who took a chance on me at Watch You Want, later at Govberg, and later at Watchbox, my Bethune team who looked out for me, and all of you guys on the internet, without whom I would be speaking to thin air. You've made the best job in watches possible, and maybe the best job in the world possible. So grateful. The white gold, anthracite dial, Generation 1 Dream Watch, somehow those DB folks were paying enough attention to my videos that when that watch popped up at the factory, they fingered it for me, and they knew to do that. Yeah, they're like family to me. We've been around the world together. Geneva, Hong Kong, Zurich, the West Coast, out in California, in LA, New York, and many more. And I've even visited the factory to see how this watch was made and met some of the people who made it. Bethune is an incredible crew, top to bottom. And I was right to pick this brand before selecting my favorite model. I could have picked some brand out of a hat, and I never would have had a relationship with the factory or the people behind it. Boy, did I pick the right group of people and the brand to match. Satisfied. This is everything I dreamed. The honeymoon will not end, because I've now known about this watch since about 2020. And I've dreamed about it on a daily basis. There hasn't been a single day that's gone by when I didn't think for at least a few seconds about this watch. So I know I made the right choice. I never moved on to something else. And I am the kind of person who can be satisfied with just one watch. Remember, I wore my Zinn for 4 years and bought nothing else. I had one bicycle for 12 years, and I'm a bike enthusiast and a bike nut. I'm a very monogamous guy when it comes to machines, and this will be my GRAIL watch till the day I die. And when I do die, I'm going to donate it to like a museum. I can't imagine somebody beating this or polishing it. I want it to go to some place where it'll be respected and preserved forever. DB even assembled a model-specific box and paper set to make my pre-owned watch feel like a brand new purchase. So, man, the whole experience, top to bottom, I feel satisfied. Viewer wrist shots number 3. Shamal D in his Zenith Chronomaster. Appreciate an iconic bridge. Can you guys tell us which one? Mark D from Bristol, UK, combines his Rolex Explorer, and just as the Explorer was designed to scale the interior of caves, we have a very scaly adventurer with this particular polar dial. We have Alex J in the Patek Philippe 70. Well, I think it's the 7340R, out on the town, living it up, looking good. We have Simon S., a man after my own heart, with a Tudor Black Bay 18 karat, and Giant Dayfi Advanced SL0 with SRAM Red. No compromise. I love it. Steve T hits it with the Gulfstream G550, flying his Gulfstream, and Rolex GMT Master 2 Black and Blue. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at the1916company.com to see your passion in this fashion. We got Pelagic 6 saying, sick, congrats, thank you, Moto Gunner, congratulations, Tim, you deserve it, I appreciate that. We got Norm M, who spots the Sydney Harbor Bridge, which was destroyed in Pacific Rim. And we got Junior Johnson saying hi to Time Hill, one of our regulars joining in. Max Smith, congrats, Tim. You earned it. Thank you so much. I hope to continue to earn it every day and be the best watch guru I can be, or whatever it is I do for a living. We have BNS saying watches and wings with the Gulfstream taking it to another level. Daddy Dundun, which Zin did you wear for 4 years? Zin was my gateway into this world, although not my first watch. EZM 1.1, and I'd still have it today if we didn't have a charitable opportunity that allowed that watch to be put to better use than it would be on my wrist. It actually went to a collector in Thailand who won the auction. We got a shear. What did you get, Tim? I just got in. Well, what I got was the Bethune DB28. White gold, anthracite dial, jump hour, inline calendar, moonphase. 9 pieces made like this one. Now, there's only 8 in the world that you can buy. All right. My GRAIL watch is real here and now. What about yours? You may have noticed a few patterns that emerge from my roadmap of GRAILs. First, I like complicated watches, not simple ones. Second, there's really nothing in this discussion of my GRAILs that relates in any way to the vintage market, for which I have very little interest and appetite. Finally, all of my GRAILs except the one I'm wearing actually hail from large brands with long histories. So let's talk now fireside chat style. Explain to me how you define a GRAIL if you're just joining the chat now. We got a question, Vianush1, what is the next GRAIL? For me, there will not be a next GRAIL. There will only be a next watch. This is the GRAIL. This is the ultimate watch forever. No, it didn't cost millions of dollars, but if I were to win a Powerball with $500 million, this is still what I would have bought. Price no object, it would be this. It's not a stepping stone to something else. Anything else is a lateral at best, not a step up. Tell me how you define a GRAIL. What are your GRAILs? Let me know now. And whether you have owned any of them. Okay, Jim Millett saying, live over 300 viewers. Yeah, we're at 314, guys. We're going to go on a nice little run here. And we got Vincent joining in saying, whoa, congrats, and I appreciate that, Vincent. Paul saying, congrats, I have a Garrick, but clearly need to up my game. No reason to leave the world of Garrick. If you want to up your game, I recommend the S3 jumping seconds. And we have Ali saying, GRAIL watch does not have a static definition. I appreciate that. Kevin saying, Tim, you put me into the JLC Duomet, so your work has an impact, at least for me. I'm glad to hear that. I hope you're satisfied. I don't want to lead people astray. That's the most important thing. If I helped you find your connection, I want that to be a fulfilling experience. Right here we've got Decibels, GRAIL, that Breguet Hands pocket watch you reviewed about a year ago. That was a real Breguet. That wasn't just Breguet style, that was the real thing. I think that was number 1602. And then Abdul, Lange und Söhne, Zeitwerk, Grunefeld Remontoire, and Philippe Dufour Simplicity. Grubel 4C Handmade 2 is the alternative GRAIL. And then we got Danny saying, for me, a GRAIL watch is that one watch that keeps time most accurately while remaining purely mechanical. That's interesting. Richard Combs says, Rolex Rainbow was a GRAIL, but once I got it, I felt unfulfilled. Okay, so caveat emptor if you're thinking about a rainbow. And Jason saying a GRAIL can never be owned. I want to watch, says Philippe Dufour, duality. Yes, the less than 10 pieces made dual escapement watch that Philippe Dufour created back in the 90s before the Simplicity. We have John G saying a GRAIL is an end of journey watch, the last piece that is above all in the collector's mind. Okay, well that's another perspective then. Let's talk about where you go from your GRAIL, assuming you believe a GRAIL is something truly attainable. One perspective is that the GRAIL is an exit watch, and we just heard that right now. Basically, once you have the GRAIL, you're fulfilled forever. You don't need to buy any other watches. You won't want to buy any other watches. Effectively, it is the sip or the drink that slakes your thirst for all eternity. That's one perspective. Another perspective, which we've seen a few times tonight in the chat box, is that you find a new GRAIL. So you've climbed the deadliest face of the Matterhorn, now climb Everest. Once you've climbed Everest, climb the slightly shorter but much more dangerous K2. There must always be a next GRAIL, and that's one perspective. Yet another view is that you attain the GRAIL and then hit a full reset. Like when I had every JLC that I ever wanted to own, and having held the minute repeater in my hand, I'm like, I've got the watch, I've got the money to own the watch. I don't need to buy it now to say I've finished the journey. And although I sold my watches for practical reasons, I did feel like my JLC journey was complete, and if I'd stayed in the watch space, I probably would have sold all but 3 of them and started a new collecting theme with new grails. We also have DJF317, my grail is the Grubel Forsey S3. And then we have Stefan saying, my grail would be A Lange und Sonne, 1815 up-down, greetings from Germany, which I appreciate because you're staying up late with me. And then Herb saying, one definition for grail is a thing that is eagerly pursued, so the joy is the journey, exactly what Tim described on that count. We have Young C saying, my grails are the VC Overseas Everest dual time. Very cool, my man. And Ali saying, grail for me is Patek 5140, peak horology, great legibility. Frank saying, congratulations. Thank you, Frank, a member of my Facebook group. And we got Abdul saying, Zeitwerk, striking time for the one and done grail. I have a very different post-grail view, which I'll call JQA, for John Quincy Adams, an American statesman who is best known for being the President of the United States. But he's also known as the only American president ever to serve as a member of Congress in a much lower office after his term as chief executive and commander-in-chief. He wanted to be a public servant. He wanted to stay active in public life. And he was humble enough to run for Congress and serve as one of many, not the one who stands above all. So in the spirit of John Quincy Adams, who did not look down on a lower office and still had that passion to remain active in public life, there are sub-grails that I'm eager to own. Things that are easily obtainable in some cases, but still motivate and excite me. The Zenith Captain Windsor Annual Calendar Chronograph. Limited series, only for the boutiques, smoked palladium dial with a Ludwig Oxlin digital annual calendar and an El Primero chronograph. Does life get any better? Also, Blancpain 50 Fathoms, the watch I highlighted in my first ever Watch You Want video is the Cadillac Divers. From a Cadillac fan, that is quite a compliment. I still want to own one. The Ball Engineer 2 Magneto S, possibly the best ever sub $5,000 sport watch, and proof positive that if you add enough cool engineered features, you don't need a manufacturer movement to add a lot of value to a watch. And finally, the Omega Gray Side of the Moon. I love the idea of a high-quality watch that doesn't scratch, and the more and more time I spend in the watch space, the more I really have a hankering for something that never scratches, never scuffs, and never needs refinishing. So yeah, the Gray Side of the Moon. You gotta love a platinum dial in a ceramic case. All right. Thomas Burnett, Tim, you're talking to a group of watch addicts here. There's always another watch, even after the Grail. It's like stopping drinking after you have drank from the Holy Grail. It wouldn't happen. Junior Johnson saying, John Quincy Adams was perhaps our most spiritual president. That's an interesting observation. He was also the first son of a president, I believe, to also be president. I will mention that Andrew Johnson later served in the Senate, but that was more of a political comeback after the fall. I don't think it was a matter of humbling himself. So JQA. And we have Damon saying, your Grail looks great on your wrist. Thank you very much. And it fits. Viewers Chats number 4, Brian S. basks in the summer sun with his Omega Speedmaster Michael Schumacher. David L. sends this wild Stingray leather strap and color-matching Tudor Black Bay GMT. Abdul R. from Germany, he's in the chat box now on your screen, is outdoors with his Vario 1945 Field Solar, which looks great. Josh P., and he of Canada, and his Rolex explore an unbelievable array of tasty treats. And Marek K. of Warsaw, Poland, and his Tissot Heritage 1938 drive us home in his Mazda MX-5. Thanks to one and all, and thanks to Sid on the switcher tonight, guys. The Grail attained. We're never going to have this episode again, but I can assure you that while there will not be a superseding Grail, there will be more watches on my journey, and you will be part of that journey. And until that time comes, time out.